In the beat of the music, I turned gay, and it wasn't just a dream. The pounding bass, the flashing neon lights, and the electrifying energy of the crowd. I never expected a simple weekend festival to turn into something unforgettable. But that night, with glitter covering my skin and adrenaline rushing through my veins, I met him. It started with a single accidental touch, a spark in the chaos of music and bodies moving as one. What happened next? I'm still trying to make sense of it. A weekend that was supposed to be all about the music became something much, much more. Was it just the thrill of the moment? Or did I find something real in the middle of all that madness? Stay until the end, and let's relive every heartbeat of this wild and unexpected romance. Hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter of this intense, emotional journey. The bass pulsed through my chest, vibrating in my bones as if my heartbeat had synced with the rhythm. All around me, bodies moved, lost in the euphoria of the music, hands raised toward the flashing neon lights that painted the night sky in electric blues, purples, and reds. I felt weightless, my skin tingling under the thin layer of glitter that covered my arms, my neck, hell, probably my entire face. This was exactly what I needed. The festival had been a last-minute decision, something my friends had dragged me into. "You're too uptight, Tyler," they had said. "Let loose. Feel the music." And for the first time in forever, I did. I closed my eyes and tilted my head back, letting the sound swallow me whole. The world didn't exist beyond this moment. The thundering bass, the lights flickering across the night, the sweaty press of strangers dancing around me. Then, it happened. A firm grip closed around my wrist, pulling me back from the haze of sound and movement. My eyes snapped open just in time to see a flash of bright blue glitter, fingers tightening over mine. I turned sharply, ready to snap at whoever had grabbed me, until I saw him. He was breathtaking, tall, his skin glowing under the neon lights, streaks of glitter shimmering across his bare chest and along the sharp angles of his jawline. His dark, messy hair stuck to his forehead with sweat, and his lips curled into a smirk as his eyes, deep and unreadable, locked onto mine. "Didn't mean to grab you like that," he said, though his grip didn't loosen right away. His voice was low, smooth, barely cutting through the heavy beat of the music. I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. "Then why did you?" He grinned, tilting his head toward the dense crowd. "You were about to run straight into a drunk guy holding 2 beers. Trust me, you didn't want that." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding, suddenly hyper-aware of the warmth of his skin against mine. "Oh, well, thanks." His grin widened. "Blake." "What?" "My name." He leaned in, his lips dangerously close to my ear. "Blake." Something about the way he said it sent a shiver through me, cutting through the humid air and the sweat on my skin. My body reacted before my brain could, fingers tightening slightly around his. "Tyler," I said, my voice barely audible over the music. "Nice to meet you, Tyler." Blake pulled back just enough to look at me fully, his expression shifting into something unreadable. "You dance?" I blinked. Yeah. I guess." Blake didn't give me time to think. He tugged on my wrist, pulling me closer to the center of the dance floor. Before I could protest, he spun around and pressed against me, his body moving effortlessly to the beat. I should have pulled away. I should have done a lot of things. But under the hypnotic lights and the pounding music, with his body so close, my mind went blank. I moved with him. Blake's hands found my hips, guiding me, encouraging me to match his rhythm. My pulse spiked, whether from the music or him, I wasn't sure. The crowd around us blurred, turning into nothing but a swirl of neon colors and heat. Every brush of his skin against mine sent a rush through my veins, like liquid fire beneath my glitter-covered skin. And then, just as my body started to fully give in to the moment, he leaned in. His breath ghosted over my lips, his hand tightening on my waist. My heart slammed against my ribs. Was he about to? A sudden explosion of sound erupted from the stage, a beat drop so intense that the entire crowd screamed in unison. The flashing lights strobed wildly, and in that split second of chaos, Blake disappeared. 1 second he was there, the next, he was gone. I froze, scanning the sea of bodies, but he was nowhere to be found. My breath came in short, uneven bursts. Had I imagined the whole thing? The way he looked at me, the way he touched me. Was it all just a fleeting illusion, another trick of the lights? I wasn't sure, but I knew one thing. I needed to find him. The music kept pulsing, bodies swayed and collided, but I was frozen in place. 1 second, Blake had been right there, his hands on my waist, his breath teasing my skin, that electric charge between us undeniable. And then, nothing. I turned sharply, scanning the sea of bodies glowing under neon lights. My heart pounded, but not from the music this time. Where the hell did he go? I shoved past a group of people lost in the rhythm, their glitter-covered faces blurred in the flashing strobes. My breath felt shallow, my pulse erratic. Was I imagining things? Had he even been real? "Blake!" I called out, but my voice was swallowed whole by the bass drop vibrating through the air. I barely knew him. I didn't even know if he had meant anything by the way he touched me, if it was just part of the wild, untamed chaos of the night. But my skin still tingled where his hands had been, and I wasn't ready to let that feeling go. I had to find him. I pushed forward, squeezing through the dancing mass of people. The lights above flickered wildly, casting sharp shadows across sweat-slicked skin. Every now and then, I caught glimpses of guys who looked like him, tall, dark hair, streaks of glitter along their bodies. But when I got close, it was never him. Frustration burned in my chest. How the hell did he vanish so fast? Then, through the flashing haze, I spotted him. Blake was near the edge of the dance floor, leaning against a metal railing, laughing with some guy I didn't recognize. The sight sent a weird jolt through my stomach. Relief, irritation, something else I didn't want to name. I hesitated, suddenly unsure. What if I had read everything wrong? What if I was just another random face in a crowd of hundreds to him? Before I could overthink it, his eyes lifted and met mine. For a split second, he looked surprised. Then his lips curled into a knowing smirk. He said something to the guy next to him before pushing off the railing and walking straight toward me. My breath hitched. The flashing lights turned his face into something otherworldly, his sharp jawline catching the glow, his dark eyes locked onto mine like a magnet. "You looking for me?" he asked as soon as he was close enough to be heard. I swallowed hard, trying to ignore the heat creeping up my neck. "You disappeared." His smirk widened. "You noticed?" I let out a small, frustrated breath. "You just left." Blake's gaze flickered over my face, as if measuring something in my expression. Then, without warning, he leaned in, close enough that I could smell the mix of sweat and something faintly sweet on his skin. "Tell me, Tyler." His voice was low, teasing. "Did you miss me?" Something in my chest tightened. I knew this game. I knew guys like him, bold, confident, the kind who knew exactly what they were doing, the kind who made you feel like the only person in the world for just a moment, before vanishing again. I should have walked away. Instead, I found myself saying, "What if I did?" Blake's smirk faltered, just for a second. The flicker of something deeper in his expression was there. And then it was gone, masked behind that same playful grin. "You want to get out of here?" he asked, his fingers grazing my wrist. The words sent a shiver down my spine. This was insane. I had known him for less than an hour, but the way he looked at me, the way my body reacted just from the slightest touch, I wasn't ready to let this go. "Where to?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Blake tilted his head toward the neon-lit path leading away from the main stage. "Come with me and find out." My heart pounded as I met his gaze one last time. Then, without another word, I followed him into the night. The deeper we moved into the festival grounds, the more distant the pounding bass became. Neon signs flickered over our heads, illuminating the scattered food stands and dimly lit pathways winding through the crowd. My heart was racing, not from the music this time, but from the anticipation curling hot in my stomach. Blake walked ahead of me, his glitter-covered skin glowing under the lights, his movements effortless, confident, like he knew exactly where he was taking me, and I was letting him. "What exactly are we doing?" I asked, my voice coming out steadier than I expected. Blake glanced over his shoulder, flashing that same mischievous smirk. "You'll see." I should have been more hesitant, but there was something about him, about this, that made me feel reckless, made me want to lean into whatever this night had in store. We weaved through clusters of festival goers until we reached a secluded area behind one of the smaller stages. A row of trees lined the edge of the venue, casting long shadows in the artificial glow of the festival lights. A few people were scattered around, either catching their breath from the chaos of the main stage or lost in their own intoxicated worlds. Blake turned to face me, his expression unreadable now. He looked at me differently than before. Less teasing, more intense. "Why did you follow me, Tyler?" he asked, his voice softer now, almost drowned out by the distant bass. I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. "You asked me to." He tilted his head slightly. "That's not an answer." The air between us felt heavy, charged. My mind scrambled for something to say, something casual, something that wouldn't betray the fact that my pulse was slamming in my veins just from the way he was looking at me. But before I could find the words, he stepped closer, my breath caught. He was so close now, his chest inches from mine, the heat from his body seeping into my skin. The faint scent of sweat and cologne mixed with the lingering sweetness of festival drinks clung to him, intoxicating in its own way. Then, his fingers brushed against my wrist. It was the lightest touch, barely there, but it sent a shockwave through my body. My brain screamed at me to move, to pull away, but I didn't. I didn't want to. Blake's eyes flickered to my lips. My pulse spiked. I felt frozen, trapped in this moment, in this charged space between us where everything was unsaid and yet so obvious. "You're not as straight as you thought, are you?" he murmured. The words slammed into me, knocking the air from my lungs. I opened my mouth, to deny it, to say something, anything, but nothing came out. Because he was right. I didn't know what I was. All I knew was that I had never felt this way before. Never felt this kind of pull, this kind of electricity crackling between me and another guy. Blake saw the hesitation in my face. Instead of pressing further, he smirked, his fingers trailing lightly down my forearm. "Relax, Tyler. I'm not gonna bite." I exhaled shakily. "That's not the problem." He raised an eyebrow. "Then what is?" "You. This. The way you make me feel." I didn't say it. Instead, I did the one thing that made sense in that moment. I grabbed the front of his shirt and kissed him. Blake made a small sound, surprised maybe, but he didn't hesitate. His hands were on me instantly, pulling me closer, deepening the kiss. The world around us melted away. The distant music, the festival lights, the murmurs of people passing by, none of it mattered. All that existed was him. The heat of his lips, the taste of sweat and something sweet on his tongue, the way his hands tangled in my hair like he had been waiting for this as much as I had. I wasn't thinking anymore. I wasn't questioning. I was just feeling. And for the first time, I didn't care what it meant. I just wanted more. Blake's lips pressed against mine with an urgency that sent my pulse skyrocketing. My fingers curled into his shirt, pulling him closer as his hands slid along my sides, fingertips grazing my skin beneath my tank top. The air between us was thick, hot, charged with something I didn't fully understand, but didn't dare question. I had never kissed a guy before. I had never even thought about it. But in that moment, nothing felt more natural. Blake pulled back slightly, his breath warm against my lips. "Damn," he murmured, his voice rougher now. "Didn't expect that." Neither did I. I let out a shaky breath, my head spinning. I didn't know what to say. My body was still buzzing from the feel of his hands on me, his mouth against mine. But before I could even attempt to form words, he smirked and tugged me by the wrist. "Come on," he said. "Where are we going?" He didn't answer. He just pulled me through the scattered crowd, weaving between festival goers, some drunk, some too caught up in the music to notice anything else. The neon lights blurred around us as we moved, my heart pounding louder than the bass still thrumming in the distance. Finally, Blake led me toward a more secluded area near the far end of the festival grounds. It was quieter here, just beyond the last row of tents. A chain-link fence separated us from the dark open fields beyond, and for the first time that night, I could hear my own breathing over the music. Blake turned to me, his expression unreadable. "Tell me something." I swallowed hard. "What?" He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating off his skin. "What are you thinking right now?" I hesitated. My mind was a chaotic mess, filled with conflicting emotions, excitement, confusion, want. "I don't know," I admitted. Blake tilted his head, studying me. Then slowly he reached up and brushed his fingers along my jawline, his touch sending a shiver through me. "Liar," he whispered. My breath caught in my throat, and then, before I could even process what was happening, a loud commotion erupted nearby. We both turned just in time to see a group of security guards storming through the festival, flashlights cutting through the dark. A couple of guys ran past us, breathless, their faces lit with adrenaline and panic. "What the hell?" I started. Blake grabbed my hand. "Shit, we need to move." "Why?" He didn't answer. He just ran, and I followed. The distant shouts of security grew louder as we slipped through a break in the fencing, ducking into the shadows. My heart pounded, my pulse erratic as we sprinted through the open field beyond the festival grounds. The cold night air bit at my skin, a sharp contrast to the lingering heat between us. Blake didn't stop until we were well beyond the reach of the flashing lights. Only then did he slow down, his breath coming in quick bursts. I doubled over, hands on my knees. "What the hell was that?" Blake chuckled, wiping sweat from his brow. "Let's just say, I may or may not have snuck in here without a ticket." I stared at him. "You're kidding." He grinned. "Nope." For a second, I didn't know whether to be pissed or impressed. But then, as I looked at him, his hair a wild mess, glitter still clinging to his skin, that reckless fire in his eyes, I laughed. Hard. Blake raised an eyebrow. "What's so funny?" I shook my head, still catching my breath. You're insane. And yet, you're still here. He wasn't wrong. Blake took a step toward me, his expression shifting into something more serious. You regret coming with me? I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the night pressing down on me. Everything was happening so fast. Did I regret it? No. But was I ready for what this meant? Before I could answer, Blake reached out, his fingers skimming my wrist again, that same electric touch that had started everything. My heart skipped. And just like that, I knew I didn't want this night to end. The air between us was thick, charged with something unspoken but undeniable. Blake's fingers still hovered over my wrist, his touch light but deliberate. I could hear my own pulse over the distant echoes of the festival, pounding in my ears like the remnants of a fading bass drop. I should have said something. I should have asked what this meant, but instead, I just let it happen. Blake exhaled, his breath warm against the cool night air. You're looking at me like you're trying to figure something out. I swallowed hard. Maybe I am. He smirked, stepping closer, so close that our shoes nearly touched. And? Got any answers yet? I didn't. All I knew was that somehow this night had shifted everything inside me. Blake studied me for a second, his eyes flickering between amusement and something deeper. Then he reached for my hand. Not just a quick touch, not teasing. This time he laced his fingers with mine, like it was the most natural thing in the world. My chest tightened. No one had ever held my hand like that before. Not in a way that felt like more. And it should have freaked me out. But instead, it made me feel like I was standing on the edge of something huge. Something I couldn't name, but something I didn't want to walk away from. You're overthinking, Blake said, his voice softer now. I let out a breathless laugh. Yeah, well, can you blame me? He tilted his head slightly. I don't know. What's running through that head of yours, Tyler? I hesitated, feeling the weight of the question pressing down on me. I could have lied. I could have brushed it off, played it cool. But something about the way he was looking at me, the way he had looked at me all night, made me want to be honest. I've never felt like this before, I admitted. Blake's grip on my hand tightened slightly. Like what? I met his gaze, and for the first time, I didn't look away. Like this. Blake's smirk faded, replaced by something more serious, more real. For the first time since I met him, he didn't have that playful edge, that cocky confidence. He just looked at me. And then he kissed me again. But this time, it wasn't rushed. It wasn't reckless. It was slow, intentional, like he wanted me to feel it, really feel it. And I did. I felt every nerve in my body ignite, every breath turn shallow, every thought dissolve into the warmth of his lips against mine. When he pulled back, my head was spinning. Blake exhaled softly, his forehead nearly touching mine. Still overthinking? I let out a shaky breath, a small incredulous smile tugging at my lips. Yeah, but now it's worse. He chuckled, shaking his head. You're impossible. I squeezed his hand. Yeah, but you like it. Blake grinned. Maybe I do. For a moment, we just stood there, two strangers who weren't strangers anymore. And I realized something. This wasn't just a random kiss in the middle of a festival. This wasn't just the heat of the moment. This was something else, and I wasn't ready to let it go. The festival lights flickered in the distance, the music now a distant hum. Blake and I stood there, hands still intertwined, the night wrapping around us like a secret we weren't ready to share with the world. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. I didn't know if this was just a moment, a weekend thing, or something more. But right now, in this stolen piece of the night, with his fingers laced in mine and the ghost of his kiss still on my lips, I didn't care. For once, I wasn't afraid of the answer. I just wanted to feel everything. Some moments change you forever. Some nights shift your entire world. Was this just a festival fling, or was it the beginning of something more? What do you think? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had a moment that changed everything? Let's talk about it. Like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next wild, emotional story.